The first half of Season 8 has recently come to a close, and now comes a whole summer of subpar DBX episodes and whatever else Rooster Teeth is limping to the barn with. Until the second half comes around, I might as well take the opportunity to give my brief thoughts on Season 8 so far. Since Nate is hard at work on the Red vs. Blue episode, this video won't have nearly as much fancy editing, and I won't have as much to say about these episodes as Nate will once the season eventually comes to a close at the end of the year. So don't worry about spoilers or anything. This is supposed to be the big legacy season with episodes that could stand on their own as finales. How close did the crew come to accomplishing this? Why don't we take a look? Oh wow, the girl fight was subpar at best. Who could have seen that one coming? I was expecting this episode to at least be as good as Weiss's, and to its credit, it does reach that level of quality in some aspects. And it's also far better than our female fights from last year. But of all the episodes this year, this one is not only the worst, but arguably has the most things wrong with it. The choppy animation is a style that has worked before, but unlike Might Might, the movements aren't exaggerated enough, and the secondary animations such as their clothes and hair don't follow the same frame rate, making it look even weirder. I'm glad the environment was used appropriately. I just wish it was easier on the eyes. Every time we get a cool looking shot, it gets undercut by pretty inexcusable jank. Blake not having original voice acting is super disappointing considering all RWBY characters up to this point have. The fight sounds were appropriately used, but neither of the two lines given to her fit in this episode at all. You'd think that's just because of the use of recycled dialogue, but even Mikasa suffers from this problem despite having a voice actor. Francesca Kahlo did do a good job as Mikasa, at least considering the embarrassing material she had to work with.
Are those 2 sets of ears? She must have 4 times the hearing.
Honestly, the episode would be better off if there was no dialogue at all. These characters aren't exactly famous for banter, and we wouldn't have gotten a setup that put Zuko versus Shoto to shame. I wish these characters were given more to do than Mikasa attacks, it's a shadow clone, rinse and repeat. It gets old after a while. What keeps this episode out of the red for me are moments of fantastic choreography, and a really exciting climax that makes creative use of both characters' weapons. People find this shot of Mikasa hilarious, I personally don't, but if that moment doesn't ruin your immersion, then this shot of Blake excitedly running towards a Titan with depleted aura probably will. Wait, I'm supposed to talk about positives. Oh yeah, Thundershroud is a banger track. Not surprising since Ruby and Sonic seem to share the principle of, well, at least the music slaps. We really thought Deathbow was going to try something new by bringing in a fake character and not just going with another Marvel vs. DC fight, one that nobody cared about. And at least the characters used were in desperate need of updated material. Doom had a really lackluster episode before, and while Iron Man vs. Lex holds up, the research on Lex specifically does not. So I didn't mind seeing their arsenals and stories more thoroughly explored. I personally see no benefit in comparing this episode's fight to Iron Man vs. Lex Luthor because of how unfair that is. But even putting that aside, this episode is decent, and I don't find it nearly as offensive as others. I love the constant back and forth momentum where one side keeps getting the advantage over the other, cause it's a great showcase of their various weapons and hacks, which is ultimately what the fight came down to. But when it comes to the back and forth in terms of dialogue, things are a little more sloppy. These are 2 egomaniacs, so it makes total sense that they're always monologuing and talking about how great they are. I just wish it was better paced with the actual fighting. Something Lex's last episode balanced perfect. Nope, nuh-uh. I said I wasn't gonna compare. But it's still the truth. Luis bragged that this was the longest Sprite fight of the season so far, which I found rather inane when it's only 3 episodes in, not even over 4 minutes when past Sprite fights have gone over 6, and only that long because of all the Shakespearean dialogue. It was nice seeing Gianni finally make a comeback, and Stephen Kelly is always great. If you liked his Dracula performance, then you should like this one because it's basically just Dracula.
What kind of a man are you? But what is a man?
Pretty sprites and drawings, really cool Mortal Kombat death, and the visual editing for the analysis was stunning. I just wish the sound effects were less distracting. And I'm also really disappointed by the missed opportunity with the body swap gag for Ben and Chad to do impressions of each other. Anytime there's a body swap plot and the voices swap along with the minds, I immediately lose investment. This episode could have been a lot worse, though I understand why this one is at the bottom of many people's season lists. Would have been nice getting something as good as Bucky vs. Jason, but I'm really glad this wasn't something as bad as Barbara vs. Gwen.
Sayonara, dip!
Shut up!
I realized Ryuko had a lot of other, admittedly better opponents, but Shadow absolutely needed this one, damn it. His first episode is still fun, but hasn't aged well and is kinda carried by Team 4-Star, and the less said about his second episode, the better. This episode got hyped up immensely by the crew as this awesome return to form for sprite animations reminiscent of Season 2, and honestly, this episode is pretty good, but I don't think I'd have gone that far. Shadow actually gets treated like a character this time, and not a punching bag for the writers. He doesn't speak that much, which I'm I'm fine with. It's fitting, and he gets really fun character moments like with the gun and calling Ryuko a faker. Brendan Blaber was a great choice in representing Modern Shadow, aka a version played by a good actor. Ryuko doesn't get treated quite as well in the character department. I know she's a hothead, but the way she insults Shadow and even Senketsu rubs me the wrong way. It's still a good performance that at least calls back to her personality earlier in the show. There are really impressive looking visuals that clearly take inspiration from Studio Trigger in the best ways, and the pacing never feels like it comes to a halt, not even when time is literally frozen, which is really impressive, though there is such a thing as too fast. The hits don't always feel impactful, and the super forms feel rushed. They would have benefited from having hand-drawn transformations, and the transition to space feels too sudden, kinda like in Captain Marvel vs. Shazam. Other than that, the climax is the pinnacle of catharsis when you know how much Shadow has been through, the sayonara being a great touch as well. Wish the death was more interesting than incineration, and if there had been buildings in the background, then we could have had a better sense of scale for the explosion. But I eventually coped with the fact that that would be a running theme this year with the deaths. Not the best fight, but it was as good as it needed to be. At least enough for me to dedicate a skit to it. Of all the battles this season, this is the one I was dreading the most. Not because it's a bad matchup, but because I knew going in how badly my boy was going to get annihilated by a cartoon character who I quite frankly lost interest in after some disappointing episodes. But stomps have been entertaining, and I'd say this one was too. Seeing it hand-drawn would have been nice, but I understand why that would have been unfeasible given the vast arsenals and spells these two possess. It's easy to tell when watching that a lot of people collaborated on this one, and I mean this in a good way. It gives us so many unique-looking spectacle shots I don't think would be possible with a team of 2 or 3. My favorites include Star's butterfly form and Steven staring down the Warnicorn stampede. I'm very happy with Steven's portrayal. Despite being his more pessimistic future self, he still has moments of empathy when trying to defuse the situation or when encouraging his watermelon babies. Kaden Jensen is an unexpected choice for our half-gem hero, and her performance helped elevate scenes like the pink transformation from good to bone-chilling. If Death Battle's mission was to make Star more likable to me by getting Megami33 of Team 4-Star fame to voice her, then I'd say mission successful. While there are great-looking shots and memorable banter, I'd say Steven vs. Star suffers from Flash vs. Sonic syndrome, where it has incredible art and fun dialogue, but not nearly enough throughout the whole fight. Most of the fight feels like it's trying to get from one set piece to the next as quickly as possible without giving moments time to sink in. A fight should leave you wanting more in the sense that it was so good, anything else would be bonus material. With this episode, it's more like what we got was great, but it feels like there was something missing. Stars of the Universe is fun and has plenty of great callbacks to Steven Universe's music as well as a fantastic transition into the more serious part of the fight, but again, when it gets to really great parts, they don't feel like they last long enough. Same goes for the death, which really came out of nowhere and looks like a copy pasta of Ryuko's death, plus incineration is getting old fast on this show. Sure, Flash vs. Sonic could have used more material as well, but the good stuff was so good there I could ignore the length problem. It also doesn't have moments of stiffness that give me flashbacks to the terrible Danny vs. Jake preview, but I still really enjoyed what we got, and I'm happy more Western animation is being allowed on the show. Still don't get why they gave Steven boobs. That was kinda weird. I'm honestly stunned we only had 2 Boomsticks dad jokes in this one. Considering this is Bad Fathers the episode, I was expecting an amount similar to Zuko vs. Shoto, but we also had to deal with the minute-long rant about Elon Musk, so I'm not letting the analysis off that easy. Forget Shadow vs. Ryuko, this is the episode that gives me Season 2 vibes when it comes to the action. It's been a while since we've had a sprite fight with legitimately great choreography. Most sprite fights recently have been more about the spectacle and showing off the character's wide movesets. While there's nothing wrong with that, sometimes all a guy needs is some well-crafted punches and kicks. Despite not being 3D, the sprite animator still managed to capture that Tekken feel with how both characters move and attack. It's just the right amount of choppy and slowness that makes their traversal feel deliberate, with only some moments of jank. I love how authentic they decided to make the voices by hiring a Japanese-speaking VA for Heihachi, who rarely has English dubs, and replicating Geese's infamous English. The setup feels exactly like the kind of thing these characters would initiate, and it's a neat way to get Marshall in on the fun. The hits are meaty as hell, the predictable taunting is a great running gag. I love how its book ended with Heihachi saying predictable back, Kings of Iron bops, this shot, and the death is not only fitting, but also genuinely horrifying. I would have preferred more of a brawl as they were falling, sort of like Invader vs. Doom, as opposed to what's basically 2 reverse Unos, but I find it funny how by making that crater, Geese inadvertently made his own demise that much more painful, and the episode ends off strong by having Heihachi punch the camera as if we've been watching an actual actual live broadcast this whole time. Heihachi vs. Geese is a short but sweet package, and it's sadly the only episode so far this season that's debatable at all. Don't kid yourself, you know it's true. Egads, SFM crew, you've done it again! And with another beloved Star Wars character, no less. The first episode of our Legacy season was perfect at setting the tone of a season where every episode could have been a finale. This is exactly the reason these kinds of matchups are perfect for this team. It's not just the scores of abilities brought to life with stunning visuals, it's also the smaller character moments of facial expressions and dialogue, which is arguably the most essential aspect of a fight like this, where both characters scream the word iconic. It would have been easy to screw up, given how limited Mickey's model is when it comes to expressing anything other than joy, and how ingrained both their voices are into modern society even outside of geek culture. Both characters are expressive as hell, and despite Mickey having a limited model, the animators got around this problem through the use of clever camera angles. I love it when filmmakers have to problem solve and the product becomes better for it. Philip Sacramento and Keston Howard were fantastic as Yoda and Mickey. It's one of the few times on this show where I can say the characters sound like one-to-one impressions, other than, you know, the times they actually got the original voice actors, but let's not talk about that. We had some really cool swordplay that made use of Mickey's flight and Yoda's force. These shots of him losing his lightsaber and getting them back are fantastic. It's cool how they worked in iconic lines and memes similar to Obi-Wan, and overall, this battle feels like what would really happen if these two fought. They have such high-spirited attitudes and are constantly complimenting each other throughout. It gives off major Might vibes. Yoda actually has character development that sort of mirrors his actual story when he decides to trust in the Force, which gives him the upper hand even. And the way the music crescendos when Mickey talks about the light is so awesome and probably the best moment of the season so far. It'll be hard to top at least. This scene gave me goosebumps and I don't even play Kingdom Hearts. That's just great storytelling. Yeah, the death is another fuck-off explosion, but it works in Ghost Yoda and manages to be really wholesome and funny, so I can't be that salty. This was such a fantastic way to open the season, and I'm still debating whether this is my favorite so far. For now, I have the other two higher simply for personal attachment reasons, but there's no doubt this episode is a masterpiece, and I can't for the life of me understand why it has so many dissenters.
Tai Lung is the greatest character ever! There you go, you happy now?
Now, for those who have seen my Blake vs. Mikasa reaction, you'll know that when this got announced, I was hyped, to say the least. This may not be my dream matchup, but it was using my dream character, and now that it's out, all the Dumpling and Tai Lung memes you see on Biffweed's channel have taken a whole new form. Putting aside my biases, this episode came out exactly as I hoped it would have. Not making it 3D was for the best, since it would have inevitably been compared to Poe's movies, which would quite frankly be unfair. Continuing the trend of previous episodes, we get yet another wholesome dynamic between our fighters. Poe is constantly popping off at Danny's techniques, and Iron Fist not once shows disrespect towards Poe. I was really worried we'd have a situation where all the spotlight was given to Poe and Iron Fist would be treated like a joke, but that's not the case at all. We don't even get a reference to his Netflix show. Just because I'm unfamiliar with Danny, that doesn't mean his fans don't exist. Both characters deserve a chance to shine. While the music has had a mixed response, I think it complements the chill vibe of this fight really well. I'm very happy with the emphasis on story, which is fitting given it's our first animated film character. With all the dialogue, orchestral cues, and long moments to let the action sink in, the way the fight story plays out honestly feels like a scene taken right out of the Kung Fu Panda trilogy, and if it was a little longer, it wouldn't feel out of place in Season 2 when Death Battle episodes were allowed to be lengthier consistently. Poe might honestly have the best looking custom sprites in the show. He's incredibly expressive, and his sprites never clash with Danny's. The fight choreography is imaginative and manages to squeeze in tons of references to the Kung Fu Panda trilogy. The funny stairs gag, the sick bamboo fighting, Shashapui, Dumpling, and I could dedicate an entire video essay to why the whooshy fingerhold scene is perfect. And then we go to the spirit realm and get the epic 1-inch punch, those beautiful hand-drawn dragons, and it's so good! But we can't finish this section without talking about the voice acting. Fun fact, when Luis posted that 9-second clip as a preview of the fight on Twitter, I quoted it by saying it'd be funny if they got Scott McCord to voice Poe. He's most famous for his roles as Owen and Trent in Total Drama, which is why it sounded fitting in my head. Turns out a lot of other people did too, because the wiki page for Iron Fist vs. Poe took my tweet as gospel and said Scott was officially voicing Poe for the episode. I really wish I had a screenshot of the edit, but for those who were there, you know I'm telling the truth. I even had to make a wiki profile just to put an end to the misinformation. The idea that everyone thought I had any kind of insider knowledge on Death Battle's production is really funny to me. It wasn't even my intention to fool people. It's just like my mom says, even if you're wrong, as long as you say something with confidence, people will just take your word for it. what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Poe is basically Austin Lee Matthews' spirit animal in this fight, and Jonathan Bullock was fitting as Danny too. I'd go more in depth, but I can save that for another time. Wink wink, nudge nudge. My only problems with this episode include some odd moments of animation and that really jarring ending. Of all the episodes to act as our first foray into animated film characters, no these don't count, Poe was the exact right choice to open the floodgates. And the fact that this episode has been doing so well gives me hope for others like Toothless vs. Baymax, Groove vs. Megamind, and of course everyone's favorite Tai Lung vs. Peach. Seems outlandish, but anything is possible when you have inner peace. We should probably move on before I get lost in the Kung Fu Panda memes.
Let's mosey, asshole.
If Poe was my dream character, then this was my dream matchup. I have tons of reverence for Final Fantasy, and Legend of Zelda is without question my favorite gaming franchise. And the original Link vs. Cloud needing a touch-up has been a recurring joke on this channel as well as the Versus community as a whole. If they were going to do any rematch this season, it had to be this one. The SFM team is responsible here, but calling them the SFM team in this case is partly inaccurate. It's actually made in Blender. To give you all an idea of how massive this change in platforms is, going from SFM to Blender is the editing equivalent of me going from Windows Movie Maker to Filmora X. The capabilities of these platforms are night and day when it comes to how much more you can do with it. Barring the obvious improvement of them being animated like actual characters this time and not planks of wood, the veritable versatility on display here is nuts. Link has tons more weapons to pull from, and Cloud is finally allowed to use more than 2 materia. A far cry from last time, basically pitting Smash Link against Dissidia Cloud, which ironically should have made Cloud stomp even worse, but it's Season 1, what are you gonna do? The way they're animated complements their fighting styles too. Link is much more quick-footed, always staying on his toes and improvising complex battle strategies, while Cloud hits like a freight train, still maintaining his skill as a swordsman and spellcaster, whereas in the last episode he basically swung as wildly as Toon Link's down taunt. I'm amazed by how much they managed to pack in such a relatively short time frame. The motorcycle battle is high octane, even though it's lacking some context. Cloud biting in is a subtle reference to Breath of the Wild, and also possibly his death in the original episode. Link breaking jars is funny. I love how all 4 Links have a distinct personality and fighting style. This shot is beautiful. Fierce Deity is one of the best transformations on the show, and the death is easily my favorite of the season. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't hire someone to do grunt sounds for Link, but the recycled material was used well, and Adam Gibb was such a great casting as Cloud. This has been my most wanted matchup for years, and I'm really happy it came out this good. I may just have to dedicate a full video to it one of these days, because believe me, I have a lot more things to say. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. I figured it out, guys. As long as a Zelda or Star Wars character is involved, the SFM team will make a banger episode. I think. And those were my thoughts on Season 8 so far. If the team keeps up this momentum, we may end up getting one of the show's best seasons, which is nothing to scoff at given their history. What are your favorite episodes from this year? Have any episodes you hope appear after the hiatus? Truly, the possibilities are limitless. If they don't give Bruce a voice actor this time, I swear to